What is up, OMNI Athletes? We have a really exciting episode for you today. This is going to be our first ever recap episode. So, in today's episode, you're going to hear from our most recent guests 9 different interviews with some of the world's highest achieving mind, body, and spirit competitors, how they approached the theme of this last season of OMNI Athlete, which was grace and grit. In this episode, you're going to hear from Olympians, former professional athletes, elite sports deal makers, and everything in between, with the understanding and true focus of how do we work with grace and grit. And just to set the stage for this episode for you to maximize its impact, the way we see grace, the definition of grace is simple elegance or refinement of movement, which in the context of sport and athletic performance and awakening our potential and elevating our state of consciousness, that's how do we allow it to be easy? How do we move with ease and with grace through our journey, through our life cycle as athletes? And grit is going to be defined as passion and perseverance for long-term goals. This is a really fun dynamic of approaching grace and grit because we want to constantly be pushing forward, constantly be saying, how do we as athletes maximize the long-term impact and legacy we're leaving and the performance that we want to have? And at the same time, how do we stay authentic to what we need as human beings and stay connected to that sense of wholeness ourselves? And that's where grace comes in. How do we flow easily from one moment of life, one transition, one stage of the life cycle to the next? And in today's episode, you're going to hear from 9 different really true embodiments of OMNI Athlete, how they approached this process, how they worked with the emotions and the different stages of their own life cycles that they went through, and how you can apply those same practices into your journey as an athlete. So enjoy this episode of OMNI Athlete. Okay, so this first clip is with Dridha, who is a former professional hockey player that really transitioned into a life of spiritual growth and development and awakening his consciousness. And in this clip, you're going to hear Dridha explain what it was like for him to have to really allow grace to take over and connect to his bliss as he made some tough decisions. He had to demonstrate both grace and grit in this clip. Enjoy. Your story is fascinating, and what makes it so energizing and what makes it so, I think, such a great example of what's possible for athletes is you went from this moment of deep despair through this kind of somewhat gradual transformation to a point where you suddenly said, on the end of this transformation, hey, I need to change the energy that I'm around, right? I have to make a radical shift in the space that I occupy, in the people that I'm around, the thoughts, the feelings, the energy that I really allow into my system. What was that journey like for you from being an athlete that, gets exposed to this spiritual development and the spiritual growth to going, oh my gosh, this thing that I loved really isn't the right place for the vibration I'm at right now?
It was lonely at first, I had started to understand these spiritual concepts and energy and like law of attraction and oneness, consciousness, meditation, vegetarianism, all these things. And each one of those topics is the exact opposite of a hockey player's discussion in the dressing room. Like guys are chirping one another. They're not caring necessarily about like feeling that deep connection. And you tell somebody that, you're a vegetarian, they'll kind of look at you. And there's that understanding within the dressing room that, hockey players should be living and is a certain way. And obviously there's some stray people in there that don't fall into that line. But I was getting further and further and further away. And I was kind of embarrassed. Like I didn't want to tell guys that I was a vegetarian. I didn't want to tell guys that, I'm not going to drink anymore. I didn't tell guys that I was spending, 2-3 hours meditating at night or practicing yoga. And so everything that I was doing and learning was very personal and I didn't express it with anybody. And so that did make it kind of lonely. And then, the next thing before you know it, I'm wanting to go to India and I see this guru and then, I have this guru now and now I have him on my neck and all these things. And it's like, I know that process was very lonely and it was very difficult for me to go through. And it got to a point where I just felt like I can't be around these guys anymore. Like I love hockey. I love the players. nothing but great guys, but it's like, I don't care about talking about like, picking up girls or, going to the bar or even like little problems. Like I started to see things from a deeper and more powerful space. And so much like the saying, you are like the 5 most people that you spend your time with. I took that to heart and I was like, well, everything I'm learning, I want to expand my consciousness. I want to, elevate my frequency. I want to, I want to taste enlightenment. I want to experience what reality really is. And so it got to a point where it was just like, this isn't where I should be. I should be living amongst people that have similar values. And so I made that difficult decision, but it ended up being the best decision of my life.
In this next clip, we have Doug Smith, who was also a former professional hockey player. And what you're going to hear from this clip is what happens when you start playing a sport because you're good at it rather than because you are in love with it. So this is a great illustration of why grace becomes so important to have with grit. Grit allows us to persevere just like Doug did in these stories. And grace is what we need to find a way to stay connected to that love and that inspiration that pulls us forward. Check this clip out. So this idea of that kind of sense of foreboding in our stomach, right? When we think about getting ready for work on a Monday, or just that sense of stickiness that comes with going somewhere related to work, to something that should be our passion. I think for a lot of us, we don't associate those kind of feelings with something that a professional athlete goes through, right? For most fans, they can't imagine how that kind of feeling could creep in when you're getting paid all this money, when you're living what would seem to the outside world to be this dream for so many other
That's
people.
The illusion, yes.
Yeah. So what do we do with that? And where did that show up for you in your career?
It showed up early. When I got to Los Angeles as an 18-year-old, I played hockey because I loved hockey. And after 2 years in Los Angeles, I started playing hockey, not because I liked it anymore, but because I was good at it. And those two things don't go very well together when you want to reach the top of anything. And so the reason that happened was because it was the first year of the 18-year-old draft, and there was no mechanisms in place. I went to training camp that year in Victoria, BC, without a contract. They didn't even have me sign to a contract. I was the second pick overall. Can you imagine? And so my people sent me there without a contract, and it was a huge risk for me. And then when they finally decided to keep me, they brought me to LA and they put me in the Airport Park Hotel, which was in Inglewood, California, beside the Forum, in a very dangerous part of town. And they left me there for 2 months. So I went and bought a Porsche. And why wouldn't I, right? Every 18-year-old go buy a Porsche. And then the head of security saw that he was concerned about me. So he gave me a loaded 38 to put in my glove compartment to protect myself in case anything bad happened. And this was a continuous process over about a 2-year period of time. And all of a sudden, I knew I had to get out. I was so sick. The culture was destroying me slowly, and they wouldn't trade me. So I spent another 2 years in a toxic environment. And it ended up in a place where the coach had actually arranged for me to fight a guy at practice just to teach me a lesson. One of the toughest guys in the league. He had arranged that it would happen. And that was probably the most emotional time of my career. I remember it being the most, it's emotional when I talk about it now, because when you have to sit across the dressing room from a guy who is getting ready to fight you and putting Vaseline on his face and taping his hands, and then the next night you have to go out and you have to defend that individual, very, very traumatizing. And so that was a regular occurrence until I finally got traded.
This next clip is with world champion extreme skier Kristen Ulmer. And what you're going to hear from Kristen is our relationship and the stages of our relationship with the emotion of fear. And when we're talking about balancing grace and grit, often what gets in the way of maintaining that balance and that equilibrium is our relationship with fear and how we are dealing with it. So here's Kristen on those different stages. As you reflect back on your career, was that awareness of using fear as an asset? Was that something you had awareness of during your career?
Not at all. I was a complete moron back then. And I just had a movie coming out, Voices of Fear, and I interviewed 25 different professional extreme athletes about their relationship with fear. And let me tell you, even if the athletes in their 30s and their 40s, even in their 50s, they have no clue what their relationship is with fear, much like I didn't back in my 20s and my 30s. I've learned that there are 4 basic ways that athletes deal with fear. Either they resist fear, and resistance comes in many forms. You could ignore it. You could try to rationalize it away, breathe it out, replace it with something like a visualization. There's many different forms of resistance. So that's the first level. The second level is you accept it. The third level is you learn how to feel it, which takes you into your body. And then the fourth level is you learn how to have an intimate relationship with it. And during my ski career, I had no idea that this was happening, but I had kind of a paradox going on. I both did the first, the resistance, I ignored it. And I also did the fourth, the intimacy with fear. And the resisting of the fear is what caused burnout for me, a lot of injuries, PTSD. And the embracing the intimacy with fear is what helped me be a world-class athlete.
Next up is Grace Upshaw Tyler. She's a multiple-time Olympian. And in this clip, what you're going to hear from Grace is just what happens when you connect, pun very much intended, to grace. And when you connect to that love of what you are doing as fuel for you to maintain the grit and the perseverance required to achieve at the level you are seeking as both an athlete and a human being.
So one of the first places that I want to start, Grace, is this theme that it seems like has come up for you a lot in your career, which is the idea of loving competition. Do you want to just share a little bit about how you've looked at competition as an athlete and maybe how that's evolved?
Sure. Basically, I have a belief that in order to be really good at something, you really have to enjoy it. And you can't do it because somebody else wants you to do it. I came from a family of track and field athletes, and I was the youngest. And for the most part, everyone just assumed I would do track and field. So it took me a couple times to quit the sport and then come back on my own and really, really become a student of the sport and really enjoy the process, whether it's, winning or losing, whether it's training, just any aspect, even getting injured. I became aware of my body in a different way than I ever had that awareness before. And it helped me become a better athlete.
Okay, this next clip is awesome. This is with Ginny Whitelaw, who is not only an Aikido black belt and martial artist, but also one of the most respected leadership coaches on the planet. And what she's going to talk about in this clip is really understanding where fear comes from. Again, what challenges us to maintain this combination of grace and grit often is fear and being unwilling or unable to work with it in a way that's skillful and allows us to truly move forward. So check out how Ginny approaches understanding where fear comes from and what to do about it in this clip.
I actually would love to start with fear. And first and foremost, where does just the topic of fear take you? And we can dive down some different rabbit holes.
Wow. What a place to start, because it was fear, interestingly, that initially took me into martial arts. I was taking night classes in college, and women at my campus were being attacked. And so I said, I need to take care of myself. And I started in martial arts. And initially it was for self-defense, so you could say that was fear-based. And yet over the years, I went from college to graduate school and then met a world-class Aikido teacher, Toyota Sensei, who just pulled more out of me than I ever imagined possible. And he said at some point in my training, if you want to reach the peak of your game, you have to start meditating. So by this point in time, it's no longer about fear. It's about a kind of development that's going on. And what he was talking about with meditation was he also trained in Zen, and we were associated with a Zen dojo, a Zen temple in Hawaii that had a phenomenal set of Zen teachers. So I started training in Zen. And what I learned in that training was sort of where fear is based. Fear being based in a self-protecting self. Fear being based in, am I going to get my needs met? Am I good enough, smart enough, loved enough, performing enough, enough, and Zen takes target, it takes aim at seeing through that, I'll call it illusion of separateness or that delusional self. So it really targets fear in a very unique way.
This next clip is with Kara Bradley. And one of the things that is incredible about Kara is she focuses almost exclusively on flow. How do we step into flow? How do we prime our ability to achieve a flow state and really maximize our fulfillment in a moment, in the work we are doing, in our performance as athletes? And how do we do that in our body? So in this clip, you're going to hear from Kara not only how we prime ourselves for peak performance, but how we do it through our body, not just through our mind and into our body. How do we embody the performance we want, which allows us to perform with grace, even in the midst of really challenging obstacles in front of us? So check out this clip. We've talked about in the past the idea of speaking directly to the body, right? And really bypassing some of that thinking mind and so much of the chatter that goes on. When we think about priming ourselves for peak performance and for flow specifically, and really entering those optimal states, do you think that's still the gap that we miss at times as performers, is that we're priming maybe our mind and we're trying to think our way. We're trying to prime our way with thought into our body versus speaking to the body as kind of that, as you just pointed, ignition to catalyze the rest of the system.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We do so much as athletes to train our bodies, to train the muscles, to train in movement patterns, right? We do that to the point where, most of our professional athletes are really, the degree of difference between their physical capacities is really very small, right? So then the next step would be training the mind, right? And we know this through mental training, mindfulness training. How do we learn to pay attention on purpose for longer periods of time? So that's awesome as well. But what I think a lot of us in general, and I forget to do it as well, is to recognize that our body is speaking to us and telling us the exact state that we're in at this moment, right here. I call it the verge, right? On the verge. Right now, our body's going to tell us, so that in this moment, we have the capacity to read our body, to make a subtle adjustment, right? To be agile on our feet, to make an adjustment, whether it be through breath, through stillness, silence, movement, rhythm. And so it's the highway, that highway between mind, like I love your shirt, mind with body. It's recognizing that there's a highway of information happening. It's not just what I did in the gym last week. It's what my body's telling me now and how that's affecting my mind.
Okay, so next up is Joe DeSena, who is the founder of Spartan and an elite endurance athlete in his own right, despite his humility in this clip. And what you're going to hear from him here is how core values allow us to demonstrate grit. So one of Joe's he is an ultra endurance athlete, and some of the endurance feats he's done are absolutely incredible. And what he challenges other athletes to do with Spartan is incredible. And it takes grit, because it takes the ability to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And you're going to hear in this clip that we have to develop these core values that allow us to maintain that kind of grit and perseverance, because without it, we don't have the reason why we should keep putting one foot in front of the other. We don't have that ability to stay connected to that next step. So enjoy this clip and really hear how the core values have driven Joe and the people around him, whether it's Spartan or his family, to achieve and maintain that level of grit. The place I want to start actually is, as a competitor, where have core values showed up for you in this journey?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would not say I'm not an elite. I literally just put one foot in front of the other, or one pedal in front of the other, and just kind of muscle through it in extreme pain, probably more pain than other people feel, because I'm not that talented at anything really. But I would say, so the question is, explain that question.
So core values, right? What is that Spartan code meant to you as an athlete or as a competitor?
Yeah. So I think, we have 4 children at the house. And when I think back to my childhood, I grew up around a mom who was a Spartan in her own right. She practiced and believed in yoga and meditation and became a vegan, but not just dabbling in it, like really like seriously attacking it, like 30 days straight of meditation, fasting for 30 days while she was meditating. She was it was another whole level.
Wow.
Dad, who was a workaholic lunatic, didn't care so much about health and wellness, but really cared about productivity. Super entrepreneur, pushed it to the limits, 22 hours a day. I'm not joking. Like, people talk about that. Like, this guy didn't stop. And then surrounded by a little society, a neighborhood where hard work and hustle, good and bad, you could be doing bad things or good things, but no matter what you were doing, you were getting after it, was respected in a big way. And so all I did was take that and package it up into a mindset that I use to get through things. And so I am not traditionally educated. I wasn't part of some, great sports teams with coaches that had wonderful sentences that I could chisel into my ceiling over my bed. I didn't know any of this stuff. I still don't. But what I knew was that you just don't quit. You work really hard, and you get to the finish line. And by the way, whether there's just you or 100 people at the finish line cheering, it doesn't really matter. It was the journey that mattered. So that's it. I don't know if I answered the question, but that's the way I look at the world. And with my own kids, somebody said to me the other day, "Oh, are they going to be failures if they don't start a business?" And I said, they're going to be failures if they don't work hard. I don't really care success or feel like, but they just better be working every freaking day.
All right, so this clip is with Dave Meltzer, who's the CEO of Sports One Marketing. He's also going to be our keynote presenter at the Future of Sport Conference this July. And in this clip, what is so incredible is Dave really is going to give you the tools you need to connect back to that which inspires you. And when we're talking about grit, the ability to persevere, to stay connected to those long-term goals, what becomes really critical is to be able to stay connected to that sense of inspiration and the thing that really connects us to that higher consciousness, that higher state. And when we can't have that connection as strong or as deep as we need it to be to stay connected, it really impedes our ability to demonstrate that grit. So here in this clip, you're going to hear not only how you can connect that flow back to what inspires you, but also what impedes you from connecting to it. Enjoy. What do you think keeps, whether it's an athlete or just somebody who really is pushing those edges of performance, from really seeking to maximize their potential? Where is that gap?
So it's the understanding of allowance. What we do is we corrode our connection to that which inspires us. So let me give you an example where the confusion comes from. In the pragmatic realm, in the lower vibration, there's one currency, and that currency is money. Right? There's that money could be gold, diamonds, dollars, yen, doesn't matter. But there is, and people don't look at currency and understand it. A current is an energy. A currency is an object, an energetic object that is put into a flow of energy. So in the realm of that we live in, it's very obvious that if I put $100 in energy, a currency, into the flow and go to a cash register, someone's going to manifest, or I'm going to allow $100 object to be given back to me.
Sure.
What athletes, celebrities, CEOs, wonderful mothers out there that I especially think have empowered more people than, behind every great athlete, every great is almost inevitably a very powerful woman in some respect. Sometimes a man, but more commonly, mom, grandma, aunt, it's out there, teachers. It's an irony that they don't get enough respect. But moreover, the real currency in life to clean that connection is faith. And understanding faith is that aggregate of what they think, say, do, believe in the unconscious competencies, which I talked about previously. And so faith is a currency. Faith is actually an object in which we put through a current that flows to that which inspires us. But instead of having to go to the mall or the store, I believe there's a field a field or a store of intention. And it holds everything for everyone. So what limits us? Number one, we don't dream big enough. We don't believe big enough. When I was 5 years old, I believed that I was going to be a millionaire. And all I needed was $1 million to buy my mom a house, a car, and never have to work again. That was my dream. Now, if I dream that big today, I'm gonna jump out a window, bro. I mean, if even for me, if I dream about making $1 billion, Bezos makes $1 billion this year, he's fired.
Right.
So what I find in the people that expand, accelerate, and grow the most is the ability to know what they want and dream big, to clean and constantly and consistently and persistently clean the connection to that which inspires them so they can be more productive and accessible to others and access what they want, and be able to literally manifest in the field of intention exactly what they want and continue to expand and accelerate so that time is taken out of the equation. They bend time.
All right, guys. So last but not least, in this final clip and in the final part of this recap episode of OMNI Athlete, you're going to hear from Terrence Steinberg, who is an elite endurance athlete as well. He's getting ready to row 3,000 miles by himself, unsupported across the Atlantic Ocean. And the reason we're going to finish with this clip is because Terrence has a beautiful way of connecting love and grit together, and how those two dynamics and those two principles really work together. And when we talk about love is very much a conduit of grace, right? We can demonstrate grace and grit when we are connected to that sense of love and wholeness as who we are as human beings. So in this clip, Terrence shares his perspective on why sometimes we might not view grit in the way that we need to really embody it, and how grit and love work together. Thank you guys for enjoying and diving deep into this episode of OMNI Athlete, and we will be back next week with our take on grace and grit.
We got a chance to connect at the Human Performance Summit in Boulder. And one of the reasons why I reached out is you had this really powerful story of how you approach the relationship between grit and love. So I'd love to start there, either with that story or what those words and those energies mean to you.
Yeah, thank you. So grit is an interesting concept because we hear so much about it, almost to the extent that we idolize this idea. But what I feel is, on a personal level, it doesn't resonate with me. And when I ask other people, they say the same thing. So I just noticed there's this big gap between what we perceive in others and what we know to be true for ourselves.
And what is that gap? Like what is it that we perceive grit to mean, and what is it actually experienced in our body?
So when we see it in other people, it's this rolled up experience of many different things happening at once. We observe resilience, we observe determination, and we call it that, but that's not what you're actually feeling. I mean, when you are going through something incredibly difficult, you're not doing it because you're motivated. That doesn't even show up. If you're doing it because you love what you're doing, or you love what you're creating as a result. And so in that moment, when I think about moments where I had to dig really, really deep, the source of power is not this kind of thing you're achieving, this goal, as much as being present in that moment or dedicating that activity to something greater.
Hey, what is up, guys? Thank you for watching another episode of OMNI Athlete. Please go like and subscribe to our podcast. That is our goal right now, is just to build this community as big as we possibly can, and we need your help to do it. So like and subscribe, share our content, guys. If this content adds any value to your world, that helps you perform, connect, go deeper, go wider, whatever it is that it does for you, if it provides value, all we ask is that you share our content and help grow this community. We can't accomplish our goal of elevating global consciousness through sport without you. You are an integral part of this mission and this purpose, and we need your help. So please go like, subscribe, and share our content, and continue to help us build and grow this community that is truly motivated to not just elevate consciousness, but elevate and shift the very culture of sport, so that we can truly experience the athletic experience in a brand new and energizing way for so many people, guys. So thank you, and please like and subscribe. Until next time.